there's no feedback. I don't know how to deal with it. So let's start with the world traveler.
Terry Withrow, county member.
Joe Lopez, alternate for the city of Modesto.
Brian Whitemeyer, alternate for the East County.
Toby Wells, alternate for the city of Ceres.
Kyle. Okay, we're just going to go in a circle.
Kyle DeJesus, Housing Support Service Manager for Community Services Agency.
Becky.
Becky Meredith, Deputy Executive Officer, Stanislaus County.
Kalua Barnes, Deputy City Manager, City of Modesto.
Claudia Gomez, Community Services Agency.
Leo Villafan, Community Services Agency.
Luis Uribe, Council Member, City of Riverbank.
Cynthia Hellman, Council Member, City of Patterson.
Francine DiCiano, Community System of Care, United Way.
Barbara Kels, alternate Housing Authority.
Thank you. So we're going to have public comment. Anybody have any?
Brad, sorry. If I could just quickly make an introduction. I just wanted to introduce Braulio, who also goes by Leo. And so Leo has been assigned as the full-time confidential assistant to report to the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance. And Leo brings a plethora of experience from the Superior Court. So we're happy to have him on board to our team.
Okay, thank you. So I see you have at least one. You can just pass it along. If okay, I have Carla Gorman.
Hello. My name is Carla Gorman. I'm a new caseworker at the Salvation Army. I continue to work with the homeless part of a population. I was down there with them at Moe's and continue the journey into the Salvation Army. I want to start coming to these meetings because I want to become real involved, and I want to make sure that I have all the information I need to prepare these clients and this part of the population for what they need to move on. I am super concerned about not only housing, but the resources that are available for them should they choose to continue on this path. I think that there is a different way we need a different approach. What we've been doing has not been working. And some of the techniques and the ways we've been connecting with this community that are so special, these people are so special, and they need so much more than I think most people really understand. One of my biggest concerns is recovery and mental health. If they want to get into housing, right, they have to be prepared for that. I don't want to set them up for failure. And I'd like you to know that if 10% of the people that were at Moe's wanted recovery today, right, they made that decision, they believed what everybody said, and that you must walk this particular path. If we lead them to a path that has nothing, we once again fail them. And as a society, we are each other's motivation. Society is society's role model, right? If we tell them that they must comply and they must be this and they must be that, but yet we don't give them the tools to do that, we're not required to fix our own cars, and we're lucky if we can, right? There has to be a mechanic shop. There has to be that. If I had 45 clients out of those 450 that wanted to get clean tonight, there are not beds for them. And the requirements to get into recovery, look, when you're ready, you're ready. When you're ready to put it down, you're ready, right? And I want to be a part of something different. And I want to motivate you to be a part of something different. And I beg you to look for your why. Why do you want these people to get better? Why do you want them to get clean? And what's going to be out there for them afterwards? Because their lives are broken and they know how we feel about them or how we view them. They know that their lives have been destroyed and families aren't there and jobs aren't there. And even the mental health and the recovery, we need to fortify that. I have one client that's been a heroin addict for 42 years. When she tries to get clean, her blood pressure plummets. She needs specialized care. We need to attract those people, right? I never thought I would be part of something like this. And I don't know what it's like to sit on boards. I don't know what it's like to be on your side. But I walk with these folks every single day. And there's so much more we need. You could throw money at it all day long. And I pose this to them. If I gave you $40 million, what would you do with it? I asked them to look at it from your view. I said, they want something from you. Society wants something from you. And you want something from them. And I really want us to meet in the middle. And I want us to have some I want the world to know that Modesto knows how to do this different. That we look at every county I'm looking on YouTube and I'm finding videos of the homeless of Alameda County, Sacramento, and I'm seeing everybody's kind of doing the same thing. Tent cities and this and that. Yet nobody has the resources. So maybe we're getting at it the wrong way, right? Maybe we're not getting up underneath these folks and the trauma-informed care that's needed. If you heard their stories, if you heard where they come from and the pain that got them there, let's not forget why we use drugs, why we have one glass of wine at night when we come home, and the slippery slope that for some, they don't come back from. I worked for 25 years on a paramedic ambulance, and I thought that was great. But this is about saving real lives. So let's build a better mousetrap. Let's show the world what we need to do. You'll have voters forever. You'll have the most faithful people in the world. Because the people that helped me, I'll never leave their side. Because I was one of them. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to go into I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Look down.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Gonzalez. I am a district representative for Congressman Harder. This is actually my first SHA meeting, which I'm sad to say, but I wanted to let you guys know that I'll be attending these more often. My main role in Congressman Harder's office is his grants coordinator. So as you all know, we don't get as much funding as we all deserve or as the Central Valley deserves. So that's why you put one person in charge of trying to find grants and be on your side anytime, we need help looking for grants or need assistance in applying or any questions, to be a liaison between you and different federal agencies. So I just wanted to come and let you know our services and give you some information on that. And yeah, introduce myself. It's good to see some of you guys.
Thank you.
Or all of you, but I know some of you.
Well, I can guess who
It'd be great
you.
to meet you all. So I'm just going to hand out some flyers.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move into the agenda items. Receive an update on the Access Center Emergency Shelter.
Good evening. So we're here this evening to give the SHA members an update on the Stanislaus County new emergency access center shelter located on the Salvation Army's existing campus at 330 South 9th Street. So on November 26th, the shelter opened with the Salvation Army as our operator. As of last Friday, December 6th, all 182 beds at the new emergency shelter were full, filled by Moe's campers based on an assessment and priority evaluation. The approximately 30 members of the Downtown Streets team that were camping at Moe's were the first in to allow them to get back to work and to assist the others in transition to shelter. Care clients and other vulnerable individuals were next. Many thanks to the Stanislaus Animal Services Agency and their team of volunteer veterinarians and other nonprofit volunteers, such as Bandits Friends, that made it possible for approximately 50 pets to be vaccinated and spayed in order to enter the shelter safely with their owners. All pets were provided a package of food bowl, crate, and leash courtesy, and thanks to the generosity and efforts of the SASA team. This was and is an important low barrier component of the new shelter that is intended to contribute to an individual's willingness to stay sheltered and ultimately become housed. The team of county employees from the Behavioral Health and Recovery Services and the social workers and case managers from our Community Services Agency worked tirelessly with the dedicated staff of Turning Point Community Programs to engage the Mose population daily and to encourage them to shelter and services. Moving 182 individuals to shelter in approximately 7 days is an enormous accomplishment. This same team, along with the Modesto Police Department, the City of Modesto, and Stanislaus County Resources, are now assisting with the transition, closure, and restoration of the Mose site. The new emergency shelter's 182 beds have been full consistently since its opening, with some minor turnover. Ideally, and as planned, individuals will transition to other permanent or supportive housing options down the road, creating the space, continual space for individuals to become sheltered. Additionally, there are 5 beds at the shelter set aside every evening for law enforcement drop-off. In total, with the Salvation Army's existing emergency shelter capacity of 206 beds, there is now a total of 388 emergency shelter beds on this Access Center campus. Another new development in this collaborative homeless strategy is the daily inventory of emergency shelter beds countywide. This is emailed every afternoon by the Stanislaus County's Community Services Agency staff to all law enforcement and other partners in order to track availability. This is kind of a big deal because previously law enforcement staff took on the burden of making daily calls to all shelter operators to assess bed availability. They no longer have to take valuable time to do this, and it is being done for them in a streamlined way. As an example, today's inventory identifies there are 16 beds available at the Salvation Army's existing Barbarian shelter. The 182 beds on the county side are full. The Access Center facility currently being constructed in modular facilities on the Salvation Army campus is expected to open in mid to late January of 2020. And this will relocate the county's outreach and engagement team that are currently operating out of that trailer on 12th Street. We'll relocate them to the Access Center campus, which is, of course, intended to be the one-stop shop for homelessness services. So with the closure of Mose, this team and other resources will now be able to return to their original assignments in the city of Modesto and other cities within the county. This will also mean and give the opportunity for focused services on the shelter population so that they might transition to housing and up the continuum. So that's the completion of our update on the Access Center opening. I'm happy to answer any questions. Coupled with this or corresponding report is Kalua's report on the closure of Mose. So maybe we take questions after that. Thank you.
So actually, Kyle, if you'll kind of drive. So so the flip side of what's happening over at the Access Center is in fact the closure of Mose. And the initial noticing of the closing happened on November 2nd, and initially we had expected to, if you go to the first slide for me. There we go. Initially we had expected that the new shelter would actually open earlier, and so we had a date of December 2nd to actually leave Mose. With the delayed opening of the Salvation Army shelter, we then moved our date for leaving Mose to today. And so I'm happy to report, we're pleased kind of with the number of folks that have been placed, but also having had the last tent come down at about 4 o'clock today. So what I thought was helpful, and I won't spend a lot of time on all the pictures, but to give you kind of a visual of, because I'm guessing there's probably some folks in the audience who haven't visited the site, but here is kind of what we looked like on the 31st, and you can just go on to the next slide, Kyle. At some point, there were probably 450 people at the camp. This is the kind of after the first picture that we took when we thought that the camp would actually be closing, and you can see right away that there's evidence of campers finding other places to live, and the shelter hadn't opened at this point. And then if you go to the next slide, just again, so you can see the progression of fewer camps, and the debris was left behind, but a number of folks actually electing to accept service, and you can go to the next slide. This was earlier today, and in fact, as I said a short time ago, next one, all the tents are down and the abatement has begun. And the intention is, based on the commitment to TRIP, is to have the site actually restored by the end of, I think, late January, early February. And so we're on track to do that. What we have experienced is earlier today, based on the list that that Becky mentioned, that the law enforcement actually starts to enforce for folks who are remaining at the perimeter. The site itself has actually been vacated, but there are some folks who've stayed kind of in that area to offer shelter beds to them based on the inventory that we've got today, and that'll be the continued practice going forward. So with that, totally open to answer any questions. I think that's the last slide.
That is the last slide.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions? I have one about what is the open count of beds citywide or countywide, I guess is more appropriate, approximately.
Did you say county or citywide?
County.
Countywide, it looks like there could be approximately 100 or more beds.
Okay.
I'm just doing quick math. But that's countywide.
Right, and that's...
Yeah, includes Turlock and some spaces.
Not necessarily low barrier, but there's
Not necessarily low barrier. That includes the gospel missions both in Modesto and Turlock. It also includes space at the Children's Crisis Center, which is ages 0 to 17.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
I don't have questions, but I want to commend the staff. I think you did the impossible in closing down Moe's and the smooth transition. I've watched the news reports. Naturally, we get a lot of fallout at the Housing Authority when anything happens, and it's been pretty much silent, which was not expected. So that we had a few people come in, but that tells me that it was handled well, and I just want to say kudos to staff.
The team appreciates that. Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody from the audience have any comments, questions on this item, these two items? Come on up.
Hi. Last month I probably seemed more challenging than anything, but our real purpose of being here is we do have a small cooperative group that keep the side of our place tidy so that they were able to stay in the shade. What we're wanting to know is, what do we give them? I've just been told about 211, but they're probably, I don't know that they would use that service. So I would like any help or information so that we can help these. We know there's 2 or 3 vets there. They talk to them and they're agreeable. What's happening though is there's people visiting them or coming who haven't accepted your services, and now it's becoming, especially with the rain, they had a huge, we are in between Gospel Mission and Stanislaus County, so it would be an ideal building. And also there is a building we're 110. There are apartment buildings for sale at 140, and that one's got residents in, but the one at 160 has been boarded up for years now. It has 10 units. I had a land agent find out for me. I've been to the grant meetings, and that'll take till July. So what we're asking for is help. If they won't utilise the services that are available, that could be set up. Teach them to do that. Don't give them a brand new house, but apparently it needs a lot of work. So with a couple of veterinary carpenters, they could be taught to build their own room, would be one of the things that I'd like to see happen. So if there's anybody who's got any ideas that can help us, please come and get my card. And I do appreciate, and I know you said before, there's lots of rules and regulations to follow. And I'm just trying to get my head around trying to understand this, because our purpose was to save the public access channel, not to be looking after homeless. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
Good evening. I'm Peter Michaels from Memorial Medical Center here in Modesto. And wondering, just wanted to know from the county, is it possible to put the local healthcare facilities on your email list for the open shelter beds? We're often faced with having to find shelter for folks who are appropriate to go to shelter from the hospital. And then also we have an issue in this county with not just the folks needing low barrier shelter, but we have a large population of people in the county who have significant medical needs, who aren't able to get into a skilled nursing facility, aren't appropriate for a shelter because of their medical needs, and end up fending for themselves somehow on the streets, taking care of very complex medical conditions. So we've been trying to work with Gospel Rescue Mission with setting up some what we call respite beds. But we even have patients that leave the hospital that are too sick to go to a respite bed, refusing to go to a skilled nursing facility because of the amount of structure in a skilled nursing facility, and end up back out on the street again with very complex multiple medical issues.
So we can.
We'll absolutely get you on the list, the email distribution list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the other hospitals also, because that's a good point. Yeah. Do you want to say something? Okay. Are you coming up here?
Good evening. My name is Ron Deloach with the West Modesto People of Action Council. And I hate to bring a bummer up, but we do an annual cleanup of our trail, the Helen White Trail. And this morning there was 4 tents on our trail, which means that there are a number of people that were in the shelter that are not abiding by the changes. And what's happening now is we're going to have to use the police department to evacuate people from our parks, our alleys, because I rode down and seen a couple of tents in our alleys. So now what we're seeing is an influx of homeless coming back to our area. I want to know if there's a strategy in place so that when this does happen on a larger scale, because if they don't confide with the direction that you guys have presented, what's the next step? Do we entice them more, or do we penalize them more? How do we get them to confide with the way we would like to see it? We would like to see everyone in an area where they're comfortable. Some people are not going to confide with that. And because of that, we're still going to have the issue of homelessness. We're going to have homelessness until we find a way to give them satisfaction in being in our community. There's people out there at Moe's that I've met that have been homeless over 10 years. How do you get them to say, okay, come into our shelter, come into our area where you're going to be safe, you're going to be okay, your animals are going to be fine? A lot of people still don't trust us. They still would rather fend for themselves. How do we get to them, and what do we say to them to give them an idea that they have just as much rights as anyone else? You know, a lot of them have been, like I said, self-sufficient for a long time. It's hard to break that stigma that they're in. So if there's any proposals that are out there for our neighborhoods to take upon and take so that we can take back, we have a community meeting every third Wednesday of every month at the King Kennedy Center, and we discuss things like this. We take it back to the public and say, hey, this is what the council presents. This is what the Alliance presents for us that we could do to help keep our area free of homeless and free of, I don't want to say criminal elements, but elements of not community-minded people. And what we want to do is, you know, we all want to be safe. So if there's anything that can be done or anything that we can take back to our constituents, that would be appreciated.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
I'm going to interject here because last two people asked a similar question, but there's going to be, these are will be out on the table, and it's Modesto Neighborhoods worked with the city and the county to come up with a statement about we're closing Moe's, there's going to be more people, be patient. We've got how many beds opening up on Kansas House in a few months. There's things that are happening, but we recognize that there's going to be an impact on the neighborhoods in the downtown. Mm-hmm. Frankly, it hasn't been as much as I expected personally, but this gives you some things, three things that you can do if it's a nuisance thing, if it's something that happened right away that you need some help with, or if it's an emergency. And then Modesto Police Department has put together this, which is also going to be out there, that has places to call for, and it shows where there's food available, there's shelter available, there's help with all kinds of different services out there. It needs to be revised because it's got it doesn't have the current or the new shelter on here, but it's something that you can have in your hands when you walk out to the folks that are in the tents and say, here's a place to go. And it gives you something to be able to do instead of just being frustrated about the thing. So these will be out there, and I'll pass these to the group here just as to let you know what's happening.
Okay, because what we've done is we were told by the police department, MPD, to not approach them. And what we have is a direct line to the sergeant involved with our particular area. And we just make calls to them and say, hey, someone's sleeping in our alley. Someone's sleeping in our park. Someone's sleeping along the Helen White Trail. And that's the method we've been using to evacuate those people from our area. You know, we don't do hands-on. It would be, now, if I had a flyer.
If you have a flyer.
If I had a flyer and I walked up to them and say, hey, there's something better.
Yeah. Yeah, and if somebody asks you for $5 for, food here, here's a place to go instead of us, providing that. So
they just didn't want us to be confrontational.
No, I get it.
And
that's not what this is about. This is if you're in the right situation. So, well, thank you.
Like I said, with the flyer, that gives us a reason to approach them.
Yes. Yes.
And Ron, the other thing I'm just going to add, if I could, is that we had a presentation here last month about one of the other tools in our shed is going to be law enforcement. And to the extent we've got people that don't want to go to shelters, that won't go to shelters, and that are committing crimes, we do have a plan in place that those people will be arrested. And that's a kind of a last option, last thing we want to do. But if we have to, and we've got room in our jails, we've got beds in our jails for these people, and we're hoping kind of the carrot and the stick approach might work with. So that's something you can take back to the meetings too, to let them know that we're aware this is out there, and that one of the options is enforcement, which is actually arresting people that are committing crimes out there, and trying to work on getting them services if it has to be in the jail. And to get them work on getting them better that way, but we aren't going to not do that this time. We're prepared to arrest people if we have to.
And that will help. It's not so much of the arresting, but to go back to our constituents and say, hey, there's a policy in place, so that all we have to do is confide, and things will get done. As far as if we have to notify MPD or so forth, things will get done without hesitation. So that's a positive that I can take back to the community.
Great. Thank you, Ron.
And if I could just interject really quickly. So we previously had several of our county's outreach and engagement team staff assigned specifically to Moe's Monday through Friday in the morning and the afternoon. They've been providing those individuals with service ever since Beardbrook Park in September 2018. So now that Moe's is closed, they are actually freed up to go back into the entire community to connect those individuals with services. So they have there'll be more outreach available to those individuals.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, resources are everything. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
So Kyle, could they contact the Outreach and Engagement Center for now?
Most definitely, yes.
Yeah, and that's in the phone list that's on there. Councilmember Ridenhour.
Welcome, everybody. Chairman and the Alliance. It was difficult to just turn around after this had accomplished and not say something. And it's not going to be perfect, and it's not over. We're not going to close up shop about homelessness tomorrow. This is going to be an ongoing thing. I believe it'll be something that will live with us forever to some degree. And I just wanted to tell you, the Alliance, because this is the group that is connecting with everybody in the county and trying to make this a better situation. I had an opportunity to go down there a couple times, and I went to the Salvation Army like many of you have. And you have, and all we have, and the people out here have done a wonderful job. It's not over. We're not celebrating yet, but the reality is that I think it's important to let you know I think we're on the right track. Don't give up. I get a phone call just before I come down here. We're not going to give up. My belief is that we should tell people we're not going to give up. We're never going to turn into a San Francisco, a Seattle, Oakland, whatever. Modesto's going to be different. Not necessarily going to solve the problem, but it's going to be different, just like it is today. And I'm very proud of what we've done. And thank each and every one of you, especially the staff.
Okay, anybody else like to speak on this?
I just want to say one more thing about that. So being in the transition of getting these people over, and I hear what this gentleman is saying about, you know, what's the solution to get them, and it really is something that nobody wants to hear, and it's a case by case. Until you can sit down and gain that person's trust, you're never going to hear their true story, right? And until you know their true story, you can't get underneath the problem. You could feed them for a day, you could get them out of the rain for the day, you could give them a voucher for the month, but that is not going to fix the underlying problem. It is the amount of suffering, either with mental illness, and we don't look upon people who get lung cancer from smoking. We have plenty of services for them, right? We'll give you chemo, we'll give you everything. We've got you, right? We've got ribbons and all kinds of stuff because that's accepted within our society as you know, an acceptable illness. But those that are mentally ill, that cannot perceive life the same way we do, and some of them may know that being institutionalized is the only option. So it's a big issue, which is why I continue to advocate for more mental health services. It's how we care about these people. You know, how we, people that are benefit, how those of us that are fortunate, how we view and treat those among us who suffer the most says more about us than it does about them, because theirs is a natural reaction to trauma. Theirs is a natural reaction to devastation, to mental illness, right? And to some of our friends, we know that, you know, started with a few glasses of wine and it got out of hand. Good people, bad disease. So, yes, that I'm really hopeful. The people that we have in the shelter right now are those, some of them looked at me and said, I will never go to your shelter. Right? But we said we would walk with you. Right? I said, I'm going to walk with you in this journey, because 17 months ago, I was deep in my addiction. And here's what you can do in 17 months. Right? Here's what you can do if you get mental health. Here's what you can do if you go to rehab. Here's what you can do if you accept the help of people that you trust. We must all walk it the way we talk it, right? We cannot make empty promises. You know, we have to, dissemination of information to this part of society, they're not stupid. They're not. They'll look you up and down and they know, how am I going to get what I want from you? So now it's time to turn that around, right? To use their skills for them, to work for them, to motivate them that there's going to be something for them. But it is a case by case. As I get to know them and their stories differ vastly. Right? What's our expectation? How long does it take somebody who's been homeless for 10 years to change? How long does it take us to lose that last 15 pounds? Right? What's it take to turn your life around completely? It took a group for me. It took people who stood by me, who walked it like they talk it. If you want what we have, you'll do what we do. And it's not just for addicts, it's for anybody. So, I don't know. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Okay, anybody have any last comments about this? We'll move on to update on homeless housing assistance and prevention, the HAP, HAPP state funding grant.
Okay, good evening, SHA members. My name is Elaine Power. I'm the Homelessness and Housing Manager for the Community Services Agency for Stanislaus County. And I actually have good news this evening as it relates to the Homeless Housing Assistance Prevention Program. First, some background. It is the $650 million block grant made available, signed into law by Governor Newsom in July of 2019. And it is designed to provide jurisdictions and communities with funding to address the issue of homelessness, very similar to the HEAP funding. And last Friday, we did receive a notice that the notice of funding availability was announced. And so the eligible applicants, as we've reported before, the continuum of cares, 44 in California, large cities, and then also the 58 counties. What's unique about HAP is that counties are recognized as an eligible applicant on their own, as opposed to HEAP if we're comparing the two. Funding allocations, we don't have precise numbers per jurisdiction. We do have the categories, 190 million for between all the continuum of cares, 275 between the large cities, and then 175 between the counties. And again, the key elements to consider is that there is the youth set aside of 8% minimum. There is not a maximum, very similar to HEAP, and that it's really designed to provide support for what has been demonstrated as best practices, and it also has to align with the community's regional plan, the plan that they've already identified for areas that need support and funding. Some dates to keep in mind. So this slide was drafted before the official announcement. So it was announced in December, the funding availability. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis. The last date for it to be submitted, February 15th of 2020. Last time we reported to this body, we did ask for a recommendation to have the CSOC designate the CSA, Community Services Agency, as the administrative entity, and that vote was made at the last meeting in November. The plan going forward is to have a community planning process to identify the funding priority areas. That those conversations will happen in December, finalized in January in time for the application submission. April 1st of 2020, the state is committed to have all HAP funds distributed, and then this is a 5-year grant cycle, so in June of 2025, all HAP funds are to be expended. Are there any questions regarding the HAP before I provide the update on the homeless emergency aid funding?
I got one
program?
question.
Yes.
If a nonprofit wants to apply for the youth grant, where do they go?
Okay, so the process for applying for the funds is, I anticipate to be similar to what we did with HEAP, which is that it was an RFP process, so it'd be a competitive process.
Thank you.
I have a question about that you may not be able to answer, but you have large cities, that's over 300,000, that
Correct.
are getting a big chunk of money. How about, does the county that they reside in also get to get money? Like, I'm thinking of LA County, LA City, LA County is the same.
Mhm.
Do they get to apply, do the county get, do the large counties also get their?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So as I understand it, the county funding is recognized as a separate pot of money. And so in the case of LA, LA County would receive the allocation, and then the city, if it's considered a large city like LA, they would also receive access to the city portion.
Okay.
One note that I want to clarify is that the community planning process for December is going to be on December 19th at the Stanislaus Veterans Center as a part of the CSOC meeting.
And that's for what again?
The planning to prioritize funding areas for SHA funding.
Okay.
And we'll send an email out to the SHA members. Are there any other questions? Okay. We'll move on to the update on the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. The first item that I want to go over is actually our capital projects, and the presentation before pretty much covered where we're at with the emergency shelter and the access center. Just to go over the items here, November 26th, we began moving people in, and we're at capacity. And as far as the access center, there was a site tour for those who would be occupying the space, and it's scheduled to open first couple of months in 2020. Planning has been underway and to well position us for service to the public. Other capital projects to report on, City of Oakdale has designated their funding for shelter renovation, City of Patterson, Naomi's House, and new to this group is how City of Turlock has identified usage of their funding to go towards the Turlock Gospel Mission, repairs and renovations. They're piloting a homeless storage project, and funding will go towards their shelter, the We Care shelter, to increase the capacity and improvement in the facilities. And in the area of HEAP services, as this group may recall, the 875 allocated for services went through an RFP process, and that did not produce the any proposals, and so we aligned that funding with the cash funding through the planning department. And just to remind everyone, in November the applications were received. We conducted a grant review in early December, and that panel did convene last week and earlier this week to make final selections. I believe the SHA members do have the table in front of you of all of the projects and the funding amount that was submitted. I apologize, we don't have a slide for that, but we thought it was important to share with the members the kind of the robust continuum of services that our community needs support for, that we don't have enough funding for. Because if you were to total all of that up, it exceeds what we're able to fund with HEAP and cash. But we did convene the panel, and we did make the decision regarding where the funding would go, and that is going through the process, and we'll look forward to announce that within the coming weeks. In regards to the HEAP Youth Services, the contract was awarded to Center for Human Services, and just to provide you with an update, they are, through the two case managers, providing navigation services inclusive of street outreach, diversion, assessment, screening, and interfacing with the coordinated entry system to ensure that youth and young adults who are experiencing homelessness can be linked to services. And with that funding, they are acquiring a low barrier shelter with the hopes of providing out of that shelter hot meals, showers, laundry facility, medical counseling, and then again another access point to link youth to community resources. We have our first report due to the state in January, and we will provide the draft report to the CSOC body in December, at December's meeting, prior to submission. I think that's it. Okay, so are there any questions regarding?
Well, I have a comment. I was asked by the county to sit on the grant review committee for these funds that are in front of us, and it was very well represented with respect to all the cities and in the county. And I will say I was very, very pleased and surprised that everybody that presented, if we had the money, would have been funded, because the people are beginning to see the collective impact that we can have together. And one of the questions I asked was, how many people are no longer going to be homeless based on your program? And that is becoming kind of the, that's what the community wants. And it's not how many vouchers did you give out, but how many people are actually out of homelessness. And I was very surprised, and many of the folks that presented these expansion of programs that they're already doing are making changes toward having different outcomes. And so I was very impressed, and the staff did a fabulous job. And I think the first meeting was like 8 hours to go through, and interviewed all the folks. And so it was, I just want to say, as a representative of this organization, we were well represented on it, and it was a very good model for the future.
Thank you. Thank you for participating.
Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, we're going to take it from the audience now for the two that you did, the HAP funding and the HEAP funding. The difference, the HEAP is what we're currently working on, and the HAP is
upcoming.
HEAP 2.0 or whatever.
Hi. During your presentation on HEAP, you listed a number of services. One thing that I didn't hear was job training. A lot of people out at Moe's, every time I go out there, I'm surprised by the number of able-bodied people that I see. These are able-bodied people that could be working if maybe they don't have a skill. We need to put them in a position to learn a skill so that they can easily convert back to being in normal society. Because what we're seeing is that they're okay with what they're doing, some of them. But if given the opportunity to work, maybe they'll choose working over just accepting assistance. A lot of them out there are headstrong. And because of that, we want to give them a reason to be headstrong. And the reason is, hey, I'm working. I can take care of myself. And some of those things need to be mentioned in your presentation rather than, hey, this is everything we can do for them, other than making them self-sufficient. Self-sufficient is a big issue with homelessness.
I agree.
So if we can chisel out some type of work program to teach the able-bodied homeless to do a particular skill, maybe that will help with the turnaround.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the value of both HEAP and HAP is the flexibility and where a community can allocate, and through the planning process, we're able to prioritize and reflect what the community wants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Lee, I'm just going to ask you one question. You said Center for Human Services had an access center. Part of what they were going to do was open an access center?
Navigation center
a
for
navigation
youth.
center. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
And there's shelter beds,
Correct.
youth shelter beds included in
Correct.
that also?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the next item is coordinated entry system.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Jessica Narayan, City of Modesto. I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief update on what coordinated entry is and kind of where we stand as a community. So coordinated entry is really the assessment of the homeless people in the community to determine who's most vulnerable and who should be placed in the available housing opportunities. Coordinated entry is mandated by federal and state funding sources. Housing providers from other funding sources may be required to do this as well. I know Community Services Agency and Behavioral Health and Recovery Services have separate regulations and contract terms that have them have to participate in coordinated entry as well. Participation is always recommended, but at some projects, it is not required. So there's 4 phases of coordinated entry. We start with the assessment part. We move to the housing match and prioritization, continue to documentation and housing navigation, and eventually housing placement. So here's a brief how the process works in Stanislaus County. Again, it goes through the definition of what an assessment is. And so in our community, we complete what's called the VI SPDAT to assess the vulnerability of each of the homeless members in our community. And then we do the housing match and prioritization. So we're working really closely with our housing providers and their funding sources to determine what are the eligibility requirements that are needed for each of the units. And so as these units do become available, we have households or individuals who are ready to move into them. Documentation and navigation is just to ensure that as, again, housing units become available and those people are matched, that they have all the documentation required on the front end, and so we can get them into housing sooner than later. And then the housing placement, it's really getting those people outside, out of homelessness and into permanent housing. So as a community, our updates as of December 2019, our assessment campaign was a huge success. We've had 1,275 individuals who were administered a VI SPDAT, and then this shows the breakdown of the families, singles, and transitional age youth. We had a kickoff meeting with our housing providers on November 13th, and we're working really closely with our housing providers to update all the eligibility requirements for each one who's participating to ensure that when we do have vacant units available, we can get people in there very quickly. We had our first case conferencing meeting this afternoon, which went really well. We were able to start looking at our coordinated entry assessment list, and we identified the top 10 and really looked closely at the top 5 and started connecting them to different caseworkers to ensure we have them all document ready and ready to be placed into units when they do become available. So our next steps for coordinated entry is our task force will continue to meet regularly, as well as our housing providers. We meet twice a month just to talk about how many people we have document ready and ready to enter into units, as well as any vacant units we have in our community. We're updating our policies and procedures, which will be finalized, I hope, both in January. And then it's continue outreach to our homeless community, and it's to ensure that we have all the documentation we need and we get them ready, again, for when housing units are available. And so I'm here to help answer any questions.
I'll just comment that as part of this, getting involved more in the funding and such, I came to realize how important coordinated entry is, and just how that's what's changed the way we work in this county is the focus on going to coordinated entry, so we know instead of all these silos out there working on their own, getting their funding and doing that, to have a coordinated entry that we know that that person is getting services from here and here and here, and we know that they should be over there doing something that they need to finish instead of coming around and asking for more on this side. So it's imperative that we keep this up and that we don't lose sight that this is what got us to where we are right now, where we're actually talking to each other and working with each other. And I think we're going to need to set aside some funding in our next cycle to be sure that that's going to keep continuing to be more robust, because that's the key to one of the big keys to this whole thing working. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I'm just really glad to hear. You said that you guys are proactively helping the 5 most vulnerable. Is that correct? At the
Correct.
Last one? If
Yes.
we can get an update at every meeting going forward, I'd love to hear updates on that.
Absolutely. I think as we continue and continue to meet with our housing providers, we'll identify vacancies and then, homeless people we are able to put in those vacancies, and then the list of those that are document ready as well.
Thank you.
Or the numbers of those.
That's awesome.
And I'd just like to add that obviously this is a very critical component as we continue to engage this population. And we really saw the benefits as we initiated the care process and understanding who is who. However, I think there's still going to be a flaw in our system until at some point we can start sharing data across our various entities. When I'm talking about hospitals, law enforcement, the jail facilities, until everybody has access to the same amount of data and everybody knows that they're looking at to point these individuals in the right direction, I still think we're still a step behind. And I know when we went through the care program, we identified HIPAA issues and other issues that are preventing us from doing that. But we really have to start looking at our legislators to help us overcome those obstacles, because if we encounter a homeless individual on the street and our law enforcement is running them, and maybe they have warrants or whatever it may be, but maybe that's not what they need. Maybe they need a mental health facility or a drug treatment facility. But if our law enforcement don't know where to take them, the next step is to take them to jail. It spits back out, and now we're back in that same cycle. So I think what we need to really do is start communicating with our local legislators to figure out how we can share the data across our various agencies so that we're not continuing the cycle and spitting people in and out of our systems. But this is a good first step, though.
If you draft something up, I would send a letter of support for that. Absolutely.
I think that's something, if you could do that, because I think we're as the SHA, we're figuring out what our role is, and that's our role, is to take this and do something with it. Just like, this whole thing with the funding has got me thinking, well, that's another role we have here, is we've got to figure out how to get this stuff funded, and that's kind of our job. So if you could do that, that would be fabulous, because I think there's people that are very interested in going to Sacramento and saying what we need to.
And I don't want to leave anybody with any illusions that that's an easy thing, because I think the first thing that we need to do, and one of the things that we talked about when we went through the care program, is what software system are we going to utilize to do this? And then everybody has to have access to that system.
Right.
And then everyone has to have the ability to access it when they're encountering these individuals. So it's a very complex thing. It'll probably be expensive to have some type of software of that nature, but I think it's a worthwhile investment, and I'm more than happy to continue to explore that with our staff.
Great, thank you.
I just want to jump in and kind of say something just to help address some of Joe's comments. Is we still have a long way to go as a community. I think with one of the things that we did accomplish through our coordinated entry campaign is we had a new release of information, which allows us to share data with those who are entering into our homeless management information system. It's still a long way to go to make sure we have a full open system, so we can see kind of the full picture of where a person has been and the services they have touched. And our current system does have the capacity to really link to those medical providers and hospitals, as well as probation as well. So this could be it's a great initiative. It is something that our community would hugely benefit from, and we do have a system in place that we could look at expanding on to help address some of these ideas.
Right.
And just having it open between the providers is a big step.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the naysayer because I believe in this, but there are some issues in sharing federal data that go beyond the state legislature. When Joe was saying it was complicated, one of the issues that we've experienced at the Housing Authority is we received the local funding and state funding and federal funding, and our federal counterparts have attempted to cross over federal information lines into the state in immigration policies and using housing information for enforcement of such, and then programs cross over, and with everybody having the same data, there's a question as to who has access for why and what are they using it for. And so please take to heart Joe's comment about the complications and being careful what you ask for, because we've had to put firewalls up in our own system, you know, even with HUD. They share offices with Homeland Security in one of the HUD offices, and then on other sides of it, we're doing the reporting that others don't want us to do, and from an agency that's one of the ones that's working with everybody.